everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and today, on this day, I have with me a gentleman by the name of Reginald A. Howard. He is an author. He is the host and creator of the Black Mental Health Podcast, and he's a mental health advocate. And I'm so looking forward to talking to him today because mental health in the Black community has long been something very near and dear to me. So I'm looking forward to hearing his perspective on things. But first and foremost, as I always do, Mr. Howard, I take a quick moment to pause, say thank you to you for making time for me today. Time is a gift. Once we give it, we can't get it back. So I so appreciate you carving out this space in your day to sit down and chat with me. And with that, sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And I got to check out a few of the episodes and you're doing amazing work and all of the conversations that you have. And so I'm hoping I could be just as amazing to the work you've already been doing.
I'm sure you were. I'm sure you doing the thing. You doing the thing. So, like I said, you're doing boots to the ground, doing a lot of work in our community with mental health, and it's just some phenomenal stuff that you were doing. As I was preparing for today's show, I was just kind of like, wow, so impressed. And a lot of times in the Black community, especially when it comes to Black men, we don't really recognize, understand, unpack what mental health and the struggles of mental health look like in our brothers. And this is something that you actually have personal experience with. So as we get started today, I was wondering if I could trouble you to kind of share, what you went through so the audience has a perspective of why this became so important to you.
Yeah, so my journey began a while back when I was having my first son, and he's 10. He actually just recently celebrated a birthday. So 10 years ago, when I found out that he was coming to life, and his mother, which is not my girlfriend at the time, but now wife, when I found out she was pregnant with him, I just felt the overwhelmness. And she always speaks about how I just had like a blank slate when we found out we was pregnant, because I don't want to say my life flashed before my eyes, but I was like, what the heck am I going to do? I don't have my father in my life. I'm barely in the back room of my mother's house. We don't have no vehicle. We don't have barely any money, barely could take care of ourselves. But I also know that feeling of having a father that I never had a relationship with at that point. He left when I was 2 years old, and I never seen my mother and father in the same vicinity, let alone like had that, special bond that I was looking to create. And so when I found out that I was having my son, what I now know, I didn't have the language back then to say it, but what I now know, I became very depressed and anxious, and just, didn't want to be what people call a deadbeat, but I also didn't want to be a present father who couldn't provide. And so it led to multiple suicide attempts because I didn't know where my safety was. Again, this is language that I'm getting now. Yeah. I never felt like I had the qualifications to become a father. And it's not to give the excuse to the men that leave, but I definitely was in a space to understand why they leave, even though I don't agree with it, because they can't mouth and speak to that feeling. They more so just try to run from it because it's not really a safety space to even say like I'm not. Especially you can't say it to a mother or your wife or anything. They're like, well, I got to carry the baby and I got all this going on. Yeah. So what do you got to worry about? And so you can't even, you feel like your struggles, your stress is incomparable, and you shouldn't even be speaking about it. So that's where my journey started was back then. And fast forward the story, I went and saw like just finding out how to get mentally safe and find that safety. And that's how I ended up doing all the things that you see me do today.
Awesome. Now, in that story, I heard you talk about she was your girlfriend at the time, kind of noticing something. And I think, in my travels around in this world, just kind of looking at things, I think when it comes to our brothers, a lot of times we're sitting next to you guys in the same room. We're your coworkers, we're your cousins, it's the homies in the barbershop. And we're sitting next to you guys, and you guys are actually struggling. You're going through it. But we're not picking up on the stuff, right? It's just, or we just want to, kind of blow it off or say, man up, just brush it off. As it pertains to your own journey, reflecting back, what is it that the people around you missed notice and could have said, hey, Reg, we need to kind of go see somebody. We probably need to go talk to somebody about that. What are some things that people need to be paying attention to?
No, that's a great question. And I'm glad you phrased it like that, because I think it shows up in a, I got it. It shows up in a, like, no, I'm gonna figure this out. Or it shows up in a, it's just so, when you hear a person say, it's that whole, and women understand it when it comes to the strong Black woman, analogy, where it's like, no, I'm gonna figure it out. Like, I got this, and all of these different things. And it's like, oh, that's almost a cry for help right there. When you say, I got this and I'm figuring it out, it got to get done. It's like, that should be an antlers or attention grabber to anybody that you love. Like, oh, they're looking for support, or they may need support. They may not, at least offer it to see what you can do to contribute. So going back to the original question, I think for me, I was blatant enough to, when I had my first suicide attempt, to text family and friends and say, hey, take care of my son. I don't want to be here anymore. And that was outright the cry. I think the internal cry was, and people may have not noticed, and when I'm thinking about it, even in this moment, is I didn't want to be around people. I was trying to sleeping on the couch all day, trying to figure it out, but didn't have the words. And to that credit, I think we're better with it now, because more people are speaking out and more people are having platforms and sharing conversations like this. I think our community, specifically the Black community, have been X'd out of the mental health field, in the sense of where we don't have the proper skill sets and tools we didn't at the time, the proper skill sets and tools to have these type of conversations openly. Because if you think about it, one of our biggest things, and I don't know what we call it in the South or West Coast or East Coast, but jonesing and making joke about our struggles. And so you grow up having competitions with, like, almost like who's the brokest competition, who's the doesn't have this designer clothes, when y'all all are struggling or all going through certain things. And so even that you can figure out that, or find out that we manage our pain in a different way. And so we don't even have that safety, going back to that word, that space to say, you know what, they could really be struggling with that, because we manage our pain differently. So I hope I answered the question. Oh yeah, you did. And that kind of leads into something that I've always kind of been outspoken about, and some people don't really understand, but I've always had the thought that our history as Black people, being enslaved for 400 years, and then, just kind of one day, people saying to us, hey, okay, you're free now, gone about your way, without any debriefing, or here's a coupon for 3 counseling sessions. That kind of perpetuated dysfunction in us generationally that, a lot of our past generations didn't want to deal with. And today, in today's generation, I think some people still don't understand how that history in this country still plays its part in us. So I think that's really a valid point that you were saying. And, I run into people all the time. And now that I have you here, I'm willing to be wrong. Okay. But I run into a lot of people in today's generation that will say, no, that's way back then. We good now. Our history in this country, do you still feel like it plays a part in our mental health struggles today? I want to answer that, but it's something you said that it just sparked me in this moment. I got to say that because I never even considered it. So we went through 400 as a race. We went through 400 years of something that you can't even imagine happening today, right? And so we weren't getting the education, we weren't getting certain things, we were barred from a lot of these things, right? So even if they offered the therapy, who was going to provide it? The people that didn't have the education, the people that put you in that space in the first place. True. And so now I'm even considering that. It's like, yo, they said we got traumatized. Yeah, after a while, do they pay for people to go to school now to be able to go? You get what I mean? It's just a complex version of it. So going back to your question, I do think it is an effect, because when you think about just certain things, taking my story for example, why am I in that position when I'm having my first son and my dad isn't there? Why am I in that position where I can't financially why is my mom coming raising me in that position? That's the historical trauma that plays a part. and to be honest with you, a lot of the things that I used to blame was on my mom being a single mother. I used to blame her for a lot of the things like that I was going through, as far as my father not being there, as far as me, the positioning that I was in life. Mm-hmm. Same thing with my dad. I even connected with him for a while and was connecting and having those conversations with him. I blamed him for a lot of things. And then I stepped back and realized that their decisions wasn't even their decisions because of the historical context and everything. True. So now who do you mad at? Are you mad at the people going to that slavery comment about, are we mad at them for not wanting to help us and giving us? And they, are we mad at our community for not supporting? It just, it plays a lot on your mind when you start to think back about who's to blame. We know who's to blame, but how to fix it and going back and forth with that. So I do, to answer it simply, yes, I do believe it's still playing to this day. But I think our generation, I'm in the millennial generation. Our millennial generation are we've seen what our parents went through. We've seen what our grandparents went through, and it's like, hey, we got to do something different because we'll just keep passing it down.
True. It's got to stop somewhere. It's got to stop, and we need to really unpack all of the layers. You know, like, I mean, if you start to conceptualize how families were, stripped apart, and you know, I can only imagine, like, from a man's perspective, to have to mentally encapsulate yourself to, like, my kids and my woman was taken away from me. And then that cycle was perpetuated in the 60s when we had our, social services came about, and, there was governmental practices that put into place to separate Black families and stuff like that. So we just have historical concepts that we have to really unpack that have bearing on our mental health. I think that, and I'm so glad to see the millennial generation just really being open to mental health, because we need to really stop passing on this dysfunction and this toxicity. So I'm so glad. I'm just so glad. Now, that kind of leads me into another area that I'm kind of trying to teeter-totter and struggle with. Like I said, I'm so happy that we're talking about mental health in the Black community. But sometimes as I'm walking around, I see some people using it as a crutch. Mental health therapy is like the buzzword. It's so popular now. And, you might have people who genuinely need it. And then you might have the kid who not applying themselves in school. They're not doing their schoolwork. They're not asking for tutoring. And they're having a hissy fit because they didn't get the new iPhone. And they want to say, well, I'm having a mental health crisis. In the work that you're doing, as you're moving about, do you see some people kind of skating, joyriding on the mental health? So I'm not the only one.
Yeah, nah, and it honestly, and this is me being frank, it makes me want to stop doing the work. And and then we know how much, like we talk about, and I know how much I do and how much people value what I do. But because it's so trendy, it's kind of hard to see who really is in it, like, for the trend, and who's in it because they want to make the history and the change in the community. So yes, I do see it. The second part, and I try to talk to experts about it all the time about what's going on. The second part of that is, I think for me, I think everyone's feelings is valid. Yeah. It has to be put in its proper perspective. And so when you look at mental health, like physical health, there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like their weight. Whether you are way obese and you're at risk for, like, heart disease and all these different things, or you got the skinny fat where you don't like how you look. That doesn't make you not fat in your eyes. You get what I mean? Like, you still feel the fatness on you, even though you're not as obese as the other individual. Yes. It's still valid. It just has to be put in its perspective. So I think the same thing with mental health. Everything is a spectrum. Everything has to be put in its proper perspective, but everyone's feelings is valid to some capacity, and we can't negate some certain people's perspective because it may just because you don't see it that way, that don't mean it doesn't need to be seen.
Okay, that's true. Now, putting it in perspective, and we talked earlier about you being a millennial. You have your oldest is now 10 years old, right? Mm-hmm. So, and everything that you know now, how does that play out in parenting? Because we all are aware that kids today are dealing with different mental issues than past generations had to, deal with, cope with. how is your parent? Is the oldest? Is it a boy or?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So we have a future Black male. So how is your parenting style adjusted, accommodated, knowing what you know now? How have you kind of morphed?
So when I first started it, I'll say this: I get lucky because my son sees the work that I do and it opens and have the conversation easily. And he calls me out on my stuff with certain things because he knows the type of work that I do. And it's like once he says it and checks me on it, I have no. You can't go out into the world and do this type of work and then come home and be like, all right, no, but that's not, that's not right. You got to cultivate that same space. So we have a very open conversation. And me and my wife always talks about him being like the third member of the family or third adult right now, the family, where he gets to make certain decisions that we know we couldn't make as kids, and contribute to these conversations. And I think for us, it has worked out wonders. Now, again, there's a delicate line that you have to go back to, like, hey, we just make the rules in here because we pay the bills, so you can't, you get what I mean? But it's way more open than I've ever had, or my wife had it with her family. And I think more kids are, I think because of the internet, they are smarter at what's going on, and he brings certain conversations to me that I didn't even think that he should be having. But I'm glad that he brings it to me and he feels safe enough to bring it to me, because then we can correct or we can adjust. Where I know a certain conversations that around like depression and mental health, my mom or family would be like, you ain't got nothing to depress about, like. And that the last thing I'll say to that too is that I hadn't realized that, again, putting everything in its proper perspective, to a 10-year-old, this is depressing. To a 10-year-old, this is stress. To a 10-year-old, this is anxiety. And you may not see it that way because you're putting it in your adult eyes, but as an adolescent, as a youth, as a teen, this is stressful to them. Like, and you have to put that in consideration and not just put your adult eyeballs on their perspective.
Yes, indeed. Because I was watching a mother go through it. That's why I was giving the example of the iPhone. I was watching, a mother go through it with her child not getting the iPhone. And I was sitting there thinking, man, we was happy back in the day to get a pair of Bobos from but it's generational evolution and growth. And we all have to put it all in perspective. But you mentioned something I want to make sure I get while my mind is fresh. Talking about your mom, then you have you, and then you have your son. That's 3 generations, and everybody's always evolving and growing. I'm wondering now, mom is a grandma. Is she able to kind of self-reflect and kind of say, hey, there were some broken parts of me. Now, is she grown along the way?
I will say within this last year or two, she has. Again, when I first started the journey, even if anybody read my first book or my book, I talk a lot about our situation in there. But over the years, she again, when you are a parent, I think you can't really focus. It's hard for you to focus. Like, my wife doesn't know what my 10-year-old into. It's like I just can't get into it. I try my best to get into it because I want to relate to him in some capacity still. Even though I may not like it, I try to understand his world so that way I can understand him, and then whatever I want to embark upon him or put into his ecosystem, I'm able to feed it through that lens. Or like when he's watching a YouTube video or playing a certain game, it's like, well, you know what that is? We just had a conversation about something the other day, somebody that was on the internet, and I'm like, oh, well, if this is reaching his level, then we need to have that conversation, going back to the earlier point. But to the point about my mom, I think she's starting to listen to a lot of what I'm doing as far as the work, and she was able to come to some of the speaking engagements or be a part of some of the events that I've had, and now it's awakening her perspective. But I even go back to, again, when I was so frustrated with her, I think she never had the safety either to be able to even deal with and process some of these emotions. And again, that's going back to your earlier question about the generational effect and slavery and different things. My mom is I'm a first generation American. My mom immigrated over here when she was 16. She had to work since 16 and never had space to like just decompress about not being around her family, when being over here by herself, not really always having to fight for everything, always having to, struggle to survive. and if you always going back into that version of like, I'm struggling to make ends meet, how can I ever say, you know what, I'm not feeling good today, I don't want to work? You can't do that. You're in a different structure, so you're not even allowed that. So I think now she's more capable of expressing herself, and even going to your point of saying like, oh, I could see how that affected you as my child, and I know I'm not perfect, but I did the best at what I could with what I had.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the conversation a lot of the generations of Black folks we just want to have, but because we're just so broken and beat down and don't know how to process it. Like you said, we don't have safe spaces. A lot of these conversations are not taking place within the generations. And I think it would just make a lot of healthy communities blossom and grow if we were able to have these conversations. Sadly, within communities, Black communities, we still have, grandpa, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it. And that's not helping the situation as well. Let me go back to something you said. Like I said, I have to, I'm going to forget.
I understand.
Like, wait a minute, what was that? But you were talking about your son, and it made me think about what I think watching videos and stuff like that, and it made me think about the impact of social media and media on young folks today, and made me think of that young girl that's in the that got killed recently, Shanquilla. Right, yeah. And people were commenting on it and reflecting like it looks just like one of those fights that you would see on social media and or these reality TV shows. And there's this common buzz and question about, does music, media, social media really have a impact on the Black community and our mental health? And what's your take on that?
I think so. And not I don't think, I'm trying to word it correctly. Yes and no. Okay. So, and the reason why I say yes, we are having, again, you learned about a lot of my work through social media. You get what I mean? So it's there, the good is there, as well as the bad. So we almost have to take the good with the bad. Whereas it's like, you can tune into that, but you can also tune into this, and it's the same. It can have beneficial effects, because I think we villainize social media, we villainize the internet, we villainize these different things that has impacted our youth, have impacted us as humans, but they also have created connectivity. We are here through the internet right now.
True.
My son is able to see his dad forever because of the internet. True. And long after I'm gone, he'll be able to see some of that work. With everything, it has to come with monitoring and regulation. I think for me, when growing up, it was the video games, and it was like, all right, playing Grand Theft Auto was going to make you go out there and steal cars and rob and all of these different things. And it was like, I actually missed certain games because it was a great way to detox from reality and being in that space. And it didn't force me and didn't make me want to go out there and do it. I just literally use it as an escapism tool. Again, these are language that I got now, but at that time, now I can say that was an escapism tool to like put my mind in something that outside of the world. And so when we look at, again, I didn't try to hide certain things from my son. Oh, this has hit your doorstep. He has friends at school is going to share things. When he's at school, there are going to be adults talking about things. When he's with his grandparents, they're going to be talking about things. He's not going to be in my care 24/7. He's not in my care right now. And so all I can do is try to autocorrect or fill in some information to him, so that way he can use his judgment and say, all right, now that I got a full range of perspective of what's happening, now I can make whatever decision or whatever conclusion that I come up to within my young mind.
Good tips, good pointers. Do the best you can. You just, at parenting, you do the best you can, and then cross your fingers on the rest. That's all. Let me circle back to mental health when it comes to my brothers, because I like to kind of get as much information I can when I have one of you in front of me. And I'm happy that a lot of you guys now are seeking this healing and saying, hey, we need help. You guys are open to it. Like we discussed earlier, that wasn't happening in previous generations. And I think one of the reasons why it's easier for brothers to say, okay, I'm going to be open to this now, is inner circles, people that are surrounding you are saying, we don't see nothing wrong with it. We support you. We got you. And we still have brothers that are like, no, I'm not going to do that. Case in point, I was having a conversation with a brother couple months ago, and he had mentioned that he had just went through, in his late 50s, he just mentioned that he went through his second divorce. And I was trying to be that friend, kind of tap him on the shoulder, like, hey, it's okay if you kind of sit in the corner and kind of heal and process everything and kind of think about it. No, I'm good. No, I'm good. No, I'm good. I'm like, okay. And then a couple of weeks later, we had another conversation, and he said to me he was actively dating again. Like he went on like 5 dates, 5 different women. And I was like, ooh, this is like a train wreck. So I'm saying all of that to say, and hopefully he's not listening because I'm going to have to, hear it. But anyways, I'm saying all to say, what do we do to kind of get more brothers on board? Because to get a healthy community, we need to have healthy men. So what are some steps that we can take to kind of get more brothers on board to stop saying, nah, I'm good. Nah, I'm good. Because we know you're not. We know you're not.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that led me to be the senior program coordinator to the organization I work with called Black Men Heal. And they provide free therapy to men of color, or we provide free therapy to men of color. And one of the things that we've learned is that modeling helps. Again, I was a beneficiary of that free therapy. I went through the first cohort. And what I've learned is if you say something to a man and if I say something to a man, it's two different ways of them listening. It's just like if you say something to a woman and I say something to a woman, it's totally different. Mm-hmm. And so I think that modeling, helps with being able to recognize yourself within something that somebody is saying. And so when you look at therapy, it's always been like a Caucasian field, and there's not any representation of men of color in there. And so when you have more men of color that look like me or that look like men out there that are expressing themselves, then you encourage automatically other men to feel acceptable to that. And so I say all that to say we have a support group every Sunday where men from all over the world, and I mean the world because we have Canada, we have UK, we have West Coast, East Coast, down south. They come in and they just share. Some men just cry coming into the space, and it's about 30 to 40 men every week. And they come into the space and they just let loose because they never seen as many men let loose as much as they had seen in this space. And the last thing I'll say is, for me, what really opened me up was one of my co-facilitators, or the co-facilitator of that space. He's an older gentleman. I think he's late 50s, early 60s. And he cried so many times in these past 2 years that I've been working with him. But I never looked at him as less of a man because I seen how he showed up the next day. Like, I got my cry out the way I felt. I expressed myself. And I'm still a man at the end of the day. And I think me seeing that has caused me to, for the first couple times this year, cry twice in a year, 2 or 3 times in front of people, in front of rooms and at events, not realizing like, oh, you feel safe. You feel vulnerable. You have now found that space within yourself that allows you to be vulnerable regardless of where you are. Even crying in front of my son, he now has seen it as like, oh, my dad cries. And so now he feels the safety and he feels all of those different things. So I think that modeling helps a lot, as opposed to like trying to force anybody to do anything, like introducing them to a male or somebody that is vulnerable, that will get them to see it in a different perspective.
Awesome. So we're just going to have to, because I think that's a lot of times, especially when we're talking about romantic relationships or, just brothers and sisters, I see as a female, I might see one of my brothers out there that need help, but you're not going to hear it from me, even though I clearly see you need help. And I'm trying to, be that friend or cousin or whatever. But, as a female, you're just not going to hear it from me. So we're just going to start directing everybody to the free therapy session. Like, look, you ain't got to listen to me, but I know you need help. You might want to. Hey,
it's a great organization out there in Chicago. That's the shirt I'm wearing, called Coffee and Hip Hop and Mental Health. It's all of these spaces all over the world. I know in LA there's one called the Boardroom where they
Okay.
offer different things. It's so many safe spaces for men now. It's just
Awesome.
introducing them to it as opposed to I guess forcing, and just, hey, join the call. Join, it's a Zoom link. Join it, just listen in. You ain't gotta say nothing, just coming into the space and just having a conversation. And usually men filter in and they like, you know what, I've been coming here 3 weeks. I've been coming here all this time. I've never said nothing, but now I feel safe enough to say it because I done watched men from all over express themselves.
With so many resources out there today, and more people being made to feel comfortable with it, we really shouldn't have that many unhealed people walking around. But you just bump into them every day, so we just got to get the word out. We just got to get the word out. I want to toss out two concepts now: Black male masculinity and Black male mental health. Is it more likely that the perception of masculinity plays into the mental health, or is mental health more of a variable in how you show up as a man? Or do they stand alone, or is it not an issue, or what?
I think masculinity has to be redefined. What I was taught, what I was taught of what a man was, it has to be redefined. And as far as I think a lot of men have feel like that. And when you talk about Black male mental health, I think it's specific to the individuals. Like that's an experience that as much as you want to love and you want to support, it is, I can never, it was one of the reasons why I started my podcast. I can never speak to a woman's perspective of what they went through. I wouldn't even be able to understand. They can share their story, but it's nothing like another woman who's walked in those shoes and being able to relate to that individual. So it's the same thing with men. It's nothing like another male that's walked down the path that they know you're going on, that you're currently on, or they have been on before, and them explain it to you because they kind of know what's going on inside. I actually just wrote in my journal the other day. I'm in the beginning / middle of my story, and I learned a lot from my father by his mistakes and the things that he didn't do and the things that he should have done. And my son, he frustrates me so much because I can see me in him. And I'm like, man, sometimes I'm talking to him, but I'm talking to me through him. And I'm giving myself some of the different things that I wish I had gotten from my father, or someone that could have seen the value I had within myself. And so I say all that to say, with Black male mental health, Black male, the masculinity, there has to be a redefining of it. And I think it's happening today.
Okay. How do you think it's being redefined?
More conversations like this.
Okay.
I think more open conversations, more men having these type of dialogues and showing up in these spaces and saying like, no, this is what we on. Like, I'm taking care of my family. Someone asked me my greatest accomplishment. I said, keeping my family together, because I've been taught so long that, your wife getting on your nerves, like find a new one. You don't really, going back to your earlier question or talking about how slavery has had the impact. I think that's why so many brothers so able to leave their children and go just deal with themselves and let the mother figure it out. I felt that early on in my life as a father, where I was able to like, all right, I could just leave. Disconnect. And then I realized the disconnect is a beautiful word. I was able to disconnect so easily, whereas now I know I can't disconnect from my wife like that. I can't disconnect from my kids like that, where that had to be learned as opposed to the way I was taught. That was embedded me in a different way. And I think that's how masculinity and certain things is being redefined.
Awesome. Because sometimes I'm scrolling through YouTube and I see healthy content like yours, but then I see some very toxic stuff coming out the men, and I'm like, and my thought process is, I try to be open and I try to be non-judgmental, but my thought process is, what would even make you form your mouth to say some of it? Because it doesn't sound toxic to you, but I don't, but that's why I'm so glad to see you and the brothers and the community that you surround yourself putting out content and information and doing the work that counter affects that stuff, because, there is the kind of toxic stuff that's just readily available out there and being perpetuated.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that because you're so right about that. And I always say, I put a post up of maybe in like September on social media when I was like, and I said, don't talk to me about all of the violence that's happening in our communities without talking about the healing that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
We highlight so much of like out using a comparable sentence of like we talk about all of the men that's not with their kids or the men that's not in those committed relationships, but we don't highlight all the men that is that, because
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing what you're supposed to do, it's quiet. When you're
Yes.
doing what you're supposed to do, nobody makes a sound. Good
True.
news, bad news travels way faster than
True.
good news. And so there's a bunch of healing, there's a bunch of work that's happening on like all I see is the good part. I actually see 70 to 80% good than I do bad.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it makes me forget that there's a lot of bad happening because I'm so embedded within the good.
Yeah.
But I know what's happening out there. But I think we just highlight so much of the bad, and it sucks. But I just know it's a counterbalance of how the world is and how you have your
Yes.
good and your bad.
Yes. I mean, because as I travel around, and like I said, because maybe the work that I do, I see so many young Black folks, young couples, just determined to plant their feet in, we're going to raise this family together. We're going to do this. But then you turn on the TV and you're like, oh, no, it's just hell in a handbasket and the Black community is all falling apart. I'm like, wait a minute, I just talked to 10 couples just trying to do. But it's just all what you want to focus on, what you want to pay attention to, what you want to buy into. I guess that maybe should be the way. So let me move on because I have I'm quickly run. I never get these things done in 30 minutes. I try. Never works out. But let me move on here real quickly and get some more stuff in here. One of the things that you offer is mental clarity coaching, and that's an arm of mental health therapy that I think people are really not aware of. But it's a beautiful thing that people really can use to benefit their life. So could you unpack what that entails so people understand?
Yeah, so I always go through this thing between like therapists and like coaching and what's good and what's bad. Therapist is more of a skill set. Like I would never try to coach somebody like out of suicide. Like they have to be clinically assessed and clinically treated. Coaching is more of like professional and personal development. There are different areas and skill sets and different things and tools that you're looking to learn and like manage your way through. A coach can provide that motivation, but they also can provide like time management skills, different things that help with you because you get, for example, like I know a lot of people that run companies get burnout. How do you manage that burnout? How can you get in a space of like, all right, that not making you depressed or that's not causing you anxiety? And so coaching for me, mental clarity coaching for me is really just helping an individual with their personal and professional development, going in and treating individuals in that way of supporting them. So that way, again, if it's not clinically like hurting you and you just need a little bit, like right now, I don't have a therapist. I have coaches that help me through business obligation, or if it's like, you know what, I need to bounce ideas off of you and holding me accountable in what I'm trying to accomplish.
Accountable. I like that. We all need to have accountability partners. So I like that part too. And then also another thing that you have, and you mentioned it earlier, you have books out. One of them I saw was, what was it? Suffering to Success.
Yeah, Suffering into Success, a paradigm shift of struggle to achieve happiness. And that was my first book. I'm working on the second one now. And that just was talking about how I realized after a while that we no one makes it out this life without some type of struggle, without some type of struggle, and they going in through some type of suffering. And one of the earlier depictions of that was like how women know that babies are going to stretch their belly out. They know that it's going to cause back pain, sleepless night, all of these different things, but they're willing to put themselves through it multiple times against stuff that I would never know, but they're willing to put themselves multiple times through to get that successful baby. If you're working out, you literally have to break your muscles apart to get that strong muscle. And then the last one that I always say is that diamond and how diamonds are formed. People are dying going into them diamond mines. And then that it started off as a piece of rock that has to go through some burning, some chiseling, and all these different things to get that beautiful diamond. And so I just realized that throughout all of my struggles, throughout all of the things that I've been through, they made me who I am today. And I wanted other people to learn to embrace their struggles because they know that the happiness is on the end of it.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. So, to the brothers out there that are mentally struggling and they're aware that they're struggling, but they don't know what the first step they should take, what would you say to them?
Support groups. They are the number one way to get into therapy without getting into therapy. And so, excuse me, there are almost like how AA and Alcohol Anonymous, they have those meetings. There are support groups where you can just go in there and say nothing, introduce yourself, whatever the case may be, virtual, in person, whatever the case may be. Take advantage of the support groups. Again, I already said it with Black Men Heal, but there's the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and they have a bunch of support groups in different cities across the globe, or across the country. And then if you can, there's a lot of people that don't know, especially if they're working, that you already are paying for therapy out of your check every week. You people don't utilize it in their insurance, but you are already paying for therapy. And if you see a person that you think will be a good therapist, they will offer you therapy at a lower scale if finances is the issue, where you can. They charge $150 an hour, and you can get them and say, hey, I really need this. And they're willing to work with you and give it to you for $50, $60 an hour because they just want to work with you. And so I think there's various ways you can get in there. But the first thing I did was Google therapy for Black men. And once I hit Google, all of these different resources was able to come up. And I think one of the things, my podcast, you could go subscribe to that, listen in there, like that helps as well. Just because one of the things that helped that I didn't realize that was happening, men in jail are listening to my podcast, and they are listening to it, sending email, and they're like, man, that episode with this has really helped. And so even
talking to you in jail,
they send some letters.
Oh,
they send the letters. They write. And I'm actually working on something with that. But they send letters.
Awesome.
They send letters, and they said, "Man, this episode really helped me. I don't know if you're ever gonna get this letter, but I definitely want to do some more with them." So the podcasting's out there, support groups. There's a bunch of different ways you can get into the space.
Awesome. Now, you just mentioned therapy, and you Googled or whatever. Quick question before I ask my random question: as a Black man, was it? And I don't know what kind of therapy you got. Was it more beneficial for you to get a therapist or counseling with somebody who looked like you, or would anybody have been effective for you?
Now anybody would have been effective for me, but my first experience was through the organization Black Men Heal, and they gave me a provider that looked like me, or matched me up with a provider that looked like me, and I think he opened me up. An older Black male, he opened me up to be more receptive to the therapeutic process.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, let me ask you my random question, because I have went over my time today. I apologize.
No worries.
I try. Let me ask you my random question, and then I'm going to ask you to tell us how we connect with you here. Let's see what we got. How many days past the expiration date before you throw out the milk?
Oh, I don't drink milk, so that's easy. You could pick another one if you want. I don't drink milk, so I'm throwing it out before the expiration.
Like, look, we ain't gonna. That's right. Let's see what we got here. If you could pick one celebrity to have lunch or dinner with, who would it be?
Oh, dead or alive? Can I use that?
Dead or alive.
I want to talk to Bob Marley. Like that, I got to talk to the Messiah himself and just have a conversation. He had a way to that he looked at the world that I would love to talk to.
Yes, indeed. We had some true visionaries back in the day that I don't see where we have replaced them. And it's reflective in the world today, but we're trying. Well, sir, tell us how we pick up the book, how what days we can check the podcast, how we connect with you for some counseling, coaching. Just tell us how to get it all in there.
Yeah, everything is at reginaldahoward.com. You can type it in on Google. I found out I'm Googleable, so just type in Reginald A. Howard. Subscribe to the podcast on all podcast platforms at the Black Mental Health Podcast. You can get the book on Amazon, Suffering into Success, a paradigm shift against struggle to achieve happiness. But for the signed copy, get it off on my website. I know people trust Amazon some more than the signed copy, but for the signed copies, get it off my website, and I'll ship it to you directly from myself. And for free therapy, go to blackmanhill.org. Also, utilize the National Alliance Against Mental Illness because they're in every city. And you can get started today.
Awesome. I love it. Well, sir, I truly appreciate you for the work that you are doing. I mean, just for your personal journey and overcoming and coming out on this side, for not passing on that generational dysfunction to the young one. I just kudos from little old me, kudos. Okay. Just keep on being amazing, outstanding out there, just kicking butt in the community. Just keep on.
Appreciate you for having me, and thank you for having me.
Awesome. That is all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reid, and I will see everybody next time.